Hello, hi. I am Olivia and this is Profits and Wealth. I just want to apologize for the video last night or yesterday. It was due to load shedding. Load shedding is a system and I have to explain this every time because it happens. It is a system where our electricity, our national electricity supplier, ESCOM, which is it belongs to it's part of government, so they switch off the electricity at a specific time for specific areas, which means that maybe say from 10 till 12 they switch off a whole entire area, and then we are without power. And that is what happened. They work according to the schedule, but they don't always stick to the schedule. So I do apologize for literally leaving you in the dark halfway through. But to continue, yesterday I was talking about the sentiment with regards to Brics. The narrative, and it's coming over more and more, that if you deal with Russia or China, then it means you are anti-American. You support the de-dollarization and all this narrative that is going on. So for me, it was just an issue. I took issue with the fact that mostly it was just sentiment and opinion. And at the end of the day, opinion and sentiment does not pay the rent. It doesn't pay the bills. But this is about when it comes to your BRICS aligned countries, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. When it comes to your BRICS aligned countries, they were looking for another way that's more favorable to trade amongst themselves. Because remember, Russia's foreign reserve, which comes to almost 300 billion US dollars, it was frozen in certain countries. Those countries were France, Germany, United States of America, Japan, Austria, and Canada. And I think there was another country those were the big ones who froze Russia's assets, which of course it hampered Russia to trade with these countries as well. And they also, obviously, they put sanctions against Russia. So what happens when you are put in a corner? You fight back. And that is what Russia did. Not literally fight back, but what they did, they started looking at other ways to trade using their own currency, and then they started focusing more on the BRICS alliance. And remember, the talks of a BRICS currency has been going around for quite a long time. But this sort of just accelerated the process. The American dollar is not going anywhere anytime soon. To transition from one country, from one currency to another currency, it's a long-term process. And it's not just about, I feel that I don't like you, that's why I'm changing currency. No, these countries who are making the decision or who are in the process of finding an alternative to dealing in American dollars, it has nothing to do with sentiment or ideologies. This is about what makes economic sense for our country. The thing about power is that it shifts. Power does not stay in the same place for a long time. America has been the superpower, I think, for the last, 100 years, I think? I might be mistaken. Before America, Britain was the superpower, right? It goes with stages that you have superpowers that they want to control everything. They want to dominate. That is just how the world works. In reality, in essence, you can go back in history and see that this has been happening through the ages. But when this happened before, we did not have the internet. We didn't have a YouTube channel where I could come and vent my frustrations or give my opinion of what I think it's actually happening here. And the narrative that comes across more than anything is it's anti-American. It's not anti-American. I cannot stress this enough. In business, sentiments and opinions don't count. Ideologies don't count. Whether you are a communist, a socialist, a capitalist, a fascist, it does not matter. At the end of the day, when it comes to trade agreements, money talks, and the one who can negotiate the best deal. So now in Africa, the talk is like we are leaning towards becoming a communist state. We are going to be, because we associate with communist countries. We associate with people who have horrible human rights violations. Let's stop for a moment when it comes to human rights violations. Sorry. Let's look at China. Because the narrative is China is more humane than America or the West when it comes to dealings in Africa. China's human rights record is not good. Remember what happened in the country? During COVID, they had one of the most rigid lockdowns in China. And this happened recently. Remember Hong Kong? When people in Hong Kong, the citizens of Hong Kong, refused to be tried according to the Chinese mainland, communist China's justice system. They were protest. People were killed. Right? Things changed in China. That's just their human rights. Abuses in their own country. How many stories have we read about China when it comes to how they underpay and ill-treat workers? But the one thing about China is when they go and negotiate their terms, they think of China as a whole. They don't come to you as an individual. They think of their country first. Let's look at Europe. And when we talk about Europe, that includes the European Union. The main countries, Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, Greece. But let's focus on France and Germany and Spain. These were the countries. Let's talk about because we are talking about human rights now. France was the country who during the 1960s were accused the most of killing African presidents in the countries that they colonized. Spain has violated in previous centuries the rights of countless Africans. Because we are talking about human rights, right? Because China and Russia, they don't respect the rights of people. And that's why as Africans, we are not allowed to be associated with them. That's the narrative. And if we associate with them, then we are anti-Western. Because the West, it's more about human rights. Let's look at America. America has invaded countless countries, not just in Africa, but across the world, under the guise of fighting for human rights. But we all know it's because there were resources there that they wanted. So the leader who was in charge at that time did not agree with the American policies. He did not agree to their terms, so he had to be taken out. There's your human rights. Because they are more humane, isn't it? That's the narrative. Let's look at Russia. Russia does not... There's no press freedom in Russia or limited press freedom. When you go and Google press freedom in Russia, it is one of the countries where journalists get killed the most. No human rights violations. Let's look at my very own country, South Africa. The previous regime, the previous government, the apartheid national government, whose rule came to an end in 1994 when we had our first democratic election. They killed black people for fun, right here in this very country. So I want to ask you, the person who's now here in South Africa, I'm speaking to South Africans specifically. I want to ask you, who are now criticizing the ANC-led government, because let's differentiate between state and party. The ANC is not the government. They are a party. They just have the majority of seats in the parliament. So they are not a government. We have a multi-party government. The ANC is just the majority party. So let's start with this differentiation. So I want to ask you, who is now crying about communism is going to take over in the country. This sounds like the 1960s, the 1980s, the 1970s, when there was the Cold War between Russia and United States. So I want to ask you, did you say anything about the human rights violations in your own country? Did you say anything when Steve Biko was killed, when Chris Hani was murdered? Did you say anything? And countless others. Where right this very moment as we are talking, they are mothers, sisters, brothers, fathers who do not know where their family members are. Let's talk about human rights violation during apartheid, of what was done to people in this country. Let's talk about that. Because now we are focusing on the human rights violations of those countries who are not aligned with the West. But now we're coming to Africa to enter trade agreements, the Brics countries, specifically China and Russia. So during the 80s here in South Africa, it was also, let's keep out communism. And those communist countries, Russia and China, were the ones who supported the ANC. So there is a history here. Britain, yes, they supported the ANC because many of the ANC cadres today, they were educated in Britain. Netherlands supported them. Even United States supported them. But at the same time, there were those who were classified as terrorists, who were hunted down and brutalized on their own home soil, who up until today, their family members don't know where they are. So, are we still talking about human rights? Or are we just talking about sentiments because the communists are here? And let's look, because this is about China and Russia. Because remember Brics at the moment, the Brics alliance, Brazil is there, India is there, and South Africa is there. But the main focus is China's influence and Russia's influence here in Africa. And the whole outcry is now, how dare China come and invest in Africa? They are taking the resources. They are invading the country. We must wake up. Yes, I agree with it. You cannot come to a country and think you're not doing us any favors. When any country goes to another country to trade, it's because I see something in your country that I want, that I need in my country. So no one has the upper hand. African leaders Do you know what the perception is that's been created about you? It says you are corrupt, you are violent, you are backwards. That's the perception about you. That is the narrative. Because you know why is that narrative there? Because you have allowed yourself to be used through the years. Many of the African leaders who were murdered were killed by their own countrymen, who were hungry for power and who were greedy. And that is a sad fact. You cannot take anyone out. You cannot enter someone's house without having an insider there. Another perception that exists about African leaders at the moment is like, we can't think for ourselves. You need a savior. You need someone to invest, and you know why that exists? Because you perpetuate that narrative. Oh, we have this idea, but we need investment. We want someone to come and start the process in our own countries. There's the resources. We have the resources. We have the manpower, and we have the skills. It's just not properly utilized. The African citizen, the African from the soil, us, you and me, we have so much to offer. But our leaders are caught napping. Where have you ever heard an African summit in the United States? Explain to me whether that makes sense. Sorry. An African summit in Europe. For what purpose? Why must you Africans go to Europe and you must go to United States? What are you going to do there? Instead, why are you not talking to each other? When you go to the United States of America, you must speak to Joe Biden. When you go to Europe, you must speak to the European Union. But what is the one single body here in Africa where all the leaders of all the 54 countries, they speak with one voice? Where is that platform? Instead of going to South Africa or Ghana or Kenya or Botswana, let's come to Africa as a whole and let's speak with one voice. Why are you not talking to each other? I think it was Paul Kagame one time who said it. Why is it that only when you come you find an American stage, then now you find we can now talk to each other? What is wrong with you? Why is there so much division on our African continent? Why can't you get past your likes and your dislikes of each other and start talking and trading and negotiating? I mean, seriously. If I go now to Botswana, I have to change my currency. I can drive from Pretoria to Botswana, but I must change my currency into Botswana Pula. When I go to Zimbabwe, I must change into their currency. Even here in the SADC region, there's not one currency. When you cross the border, you must exchange one currency for another. Where is the unity in that? Where? We don't need a savior. What we need is cohesion, it's unity, and to speak with one voice. And what we need is for you, our African leaders, to sit around the table, air your differences, and just iron it out for the sake of the continent, for the sake of our people, and this beautiful soil that we are on. Africa is crying. And it's up to you to make the change. Because we as African citizens, unfortunately for us, we have to wait on what you are saying. And so far, when it comes to South Africa specific, I don't like what I'm hearing. Right now we have a president, President Cyril Ramaphosa. No one knows what you are thinking. You are my president. I don't know what you are thinking. I don't know what your policies are. You do not take us into your confidence. We must read about what decisions you have made and what affects us. We must read about it. But you can have these useless family meetings that means absolutely nothing. And when you say nothing, we need transparency. We need for you to take us into your confidence. Because right now, we don't think, it doesn't seem as if we have a leader. And yet, when it comes to Brics, we are supposed to be leading on the African continent. Let me get back to the issue of China, right? China has been present in Africa. There's a long history of China's presence in Africa. But I want to focus on Chinese African investment. Since 2011 up until 2021, China has invested almost 393 billion US dollars in Africa. Those are it's all combined. All the countries in Africa combined. Let me just get that information to you. There is China's, Africa's investment from 2011 up until 2021. Let's look at the American investment. Because remember, America has been has always been one of the biggest investors in Africa. So this is not just South Africa. This is the whole of Africa. America's investment has reduced. Remember China's investment? I have the figures from 2011. At the same time, America's investment, it started reducing, went up, reducing, and then went up, went up. Sorry, that's China's investment. When you look at the investment of America from 2005 up until 2021, America's investment has shrunk in Africa, whereas China's investment has increased. So according to this, from 2011 up until 2021, it's almost 393 billion US dollars that was invested in Africa. So the history of investment of Chinese Africa investment, it has been with us for a while. This is now, when it comes in terms of investments, remember I said in the beginning, opinions, sentiment, and ideologies do not pay the rent. So whether you love or hate communism, whether you love or hate capitalism, whether you support socialism or democracy or whatever fancy name you want to call it, it's irrelevant when it comes to business. Have you ever seen in war-torn countries, trade still continues, production still continues? So that shows you human rights, it's just a farce. It's a word that we say to make ourselves feel better and sleep better at night. In terms of China, China has been investing in America. The total Chinese investment in America from 2002 up until 2016 is $145 billion. I will say that again. China has been actively investing in America. From the figures from 2002 till 2016, it's $145 billion US dollars. So does that make America anti-American because they take investment from China? Because this is now the narrative when it comes to Africa. We accept investment from China, so that must make us anti-American. We deal with Russia, so that must make us anti-American. I will follow this video up to look at Russian investments in America and in other European countries. Remember, Russia has foreign investment, foreign reserves, in America. So America was holding some of Russia's assets. France was holding some of Russia's assets. So do Germany, so do Japan, so does Canada and Austria. And Britain, United Kingdom. So does that make them anti-Western because they have foreign reserves of Russia? Now, China invested in America from 2002 to 2016. That's a period of 14 years. China invested $145 billion US dollars in America. I didn't hear anyone saying that that's anti-Western or anti-American or anti-government. And I just want to be clear. This is not a message to the American people. This is about the governments that unfortunately they are put in power and they do things. And then, because I am a South African, there was a time when Jacob Zuma was our president, when I was ashamed to be a South African. So, because of what our leaders do, we are being judged according to their behavior. But we get the leaders that we deserve. We voted them in. Regardless of whether you voted for them or not, the majority people in your country voted in a certain party or a certain person. And that says the majority of the people in your country support this person, this narrative, and what they stand for. So back to China. Exports to China. America exported $124.5 billion US dollars to China. That's goods and services. Let's look again at imports from China. It's $434.7 billion US dollars. Hang on. China is exporting and importing stuff to and from America? Does that mean that everyone is now anti-Western? Can you see how ridiculous the sentiment is? This is about trade agreements. This is about benefit. This is about negotiating and buying power. Do you see anywhere sentiments in that? Our governments take decisions, and then you and I want to fight about their decisions while they just continue along their business. We must stop with this narrative that if you don't support a certain person, it means you are against that person. It shows a lack of intelligence. It shows your inability to debate, your inability to think independently. It shows that you lack the capacity for critical thinking. And this is what is happening here right now. Let's look more. Oh, look. We have Chinese companies we have American companies in China. There are almost 9,000 American companies in China. McDonald's, the burger people, they have more than 2,500 restaurants in China. KFC has more than 7,000 KFC places in China. Walmart has 400 stores. Coca-Cola has 45 factories. And bear in mind, China has 1.4 billion people. There's your market. There's your workforce. What more do you need? You have a market. You have a workforce. And you have, like they say, let's come back to human rights. There's no minimum wage in China the last time I checked. I might be wrong. So you can then produce and sell. The market is there. The environment is there. It makes economic sense. It makes financial sense. Nike. China is Nike's second largest market. And Apple. The revenue in Apple from China is 40.3 billion US dollars. You see, this whole sentiment about if you support China or if you deal with Russia, then you are a communist. That sentiment, it comes from the time of the Cold War between America and between the United States and the Soviet Union. Remember the Soviet Union? When the mother Russia was still all one. So that sentiment has also driven the atrocities that were taking place here in South Africa. The narrative of apartheid was, let's kill the swart gevaar. Loosely translated, let's kill the black danger. Black people were seen as the black danger. Then communism, the color for communism was red. It symbolizes communism. And the South African government clustered everything together, anti-black, anti-communism. And I find that narrative now is coming up again. And where it has led to before, because now again, it's us and them. And we must absolutely refuse to buy back into that narrative. We must absolutely refuse to be bound by ideologies. Because if you look, when you see a meeting on the national stage, China and Russia, before Russia invaded Ukraine or they attacked Ukraine, before that time, when all these countries met, do you think that they discussed ideologies? Do you think that they sit around the table and say, oh, actually, we want to push forward our communist agenda? Do you think that when they meet on the world stage, they say, you know what? No, we are the West. We can't negotiate with you. It is stupid, it's irrational, and it's ridiculous. This is about money. And we must be honest and say it is about money. So you African leaders, and let me again just focus on South Africa. You know, we were one of the last countries. I think we were the last country in Africa in 1994 basically we were liberated. We didn't have Western powers here. It wasn't the French or the British, right? I think it was 1961, we got independence from Britain. And then the nationalist government, or we became a republic in 1961. And the Afrikaners, the nationalist party, became the government of the day. There was a lot of blood shed. People were killed for this freedom that we have today. So because we were the last country, we saw many examples in what was happening in the rest of Africa. This was before the internet. This was before YouTube and Google and WhatsApp. Oh, there was no communication or no source of information except your encyclopedias, the TV and the radio. And the narrative was being driven by a specific agenda. So what we saw when we watched anything on TV about our continent, what we saw was famine, war, poverty, hunger, corruption, bloodshed. That was the picture that we saw of our continent. And here's another thing about South Africans that I find very interesting. They don't see themselves as African. Listen, dude, when you are African, whether you like it or not. When you are born in the soil, when you are born in this country, you are in Africa, you are from Africa, and you are an African. Remember that. Because it seems that we forget that we are part of this beautiful and vast continent. So that was the image that was portrayed of Africa. And what we saw, we didn't see the leaders being killed by the colonizers. We did not see how other Africans were being used by the colonizers to kill those who were seen as a threat. What we see was a chaotic Africa. So when South Africa got their democracy in 1994, when we voted in this ANC government, full of hope, expectation, happiness, free at last, we were being told that South Africa is going to follow the route of all the other African countries. And what was that route? The route of corruption. The route, the picture, the perception that we cannot take care of our own. We need the West to come in and tell us how to manage things. We need the West to come and build roads, to come with the expertise and the skills because, oh, you are African. You don't have the ability or the skills. You lack the intelligence to run a country. Fair enough. That was the message that was being portrayed. And you know what is sad? This country and this continent, with all its potential, all its beauty, its splendor, the possibilities, with all the endless riches and treasures in this continent, our leaders, not all of them, some of them, and me, I'm talking specifically about South Africa, our leaders still don't get it. They still don't get it. Our cry should not be about communism. Our cry should be for better leaders so that they can make better decisions and enter favorable trade agreements so that we can see our countries flourish and grow. We don't have a lack of skills or jobs in this country. Sorry, we don't have a lack of jobs. We have a lack of skills in certain sectors. You know why? Because the companies who can employ you are not willing to employ you. Because they want you ready-made through that door. They're not prepared to train you. They want you to come in there, know the job, make profits, and get paid. Where do you get the skills? Where do you get the know-how if you don't have someone to show you how to do it? You can have 50 degrees, but the moment you walk into any workplace, you must know that I'm going to start from the bottom up. Our leaders don't get it. Right now, I'm holding them responsible for what is happening in our country. I have yet to see a South African leader, a politician, standing up and say, I love this country so much that I will do what it takes to take this country in the right direction. Instead of now crying about Brics, crying about China and Russia. Hence the same China that you are now crying about who's investing in South Africa and in Africa. It's the same China who have been investing in the United States for how many years now? But no, not Africa. Because Africans, oh my gosh, they can't think for themselves. No. Africans, they don't know how to negotiate. It's true. They don't know how to negotiate. Because if they knew how to negotiate, we would not be having this conversation. No one is coming to save you. The other issue is the issue of energy. There is a solution to our electricity problem. You cannot, with electricity, there's no either or. It's a combination of nuclear, of coal, and of renewable energy. Right now, the biggest obstacle to renewable energy is our government. We have an old fossil called Gwedimantashe, who is our Minister of Energy and I don't know what else. Energy and something what. Who has to decide on the policies governing renewable energy. And it's the biggest blockage. Because they want to go the nuclear route to buy, I don't know where Russia fits in, but they want to buy the nuclear route. A few years ago, our civic organizations had to take the government to court because they wanted to enter into an agreement with Russia to build nuclear power stations that would have put us in debt for I don't know how many years. We don't have the money for nuclear. You know what is great about renewable energy? That once you install renewable energy, you become a power station on your own. You generate power that you can feed back to the grid. But let me say to you why this government will not support it. Because they can't put their finger in that pie. They like to have their fingers in so many pies. And here is the thing, we understand. Look, we understand how business works. The greasing of palms, it will happen. You need to be compensated for bringing people together. But this is what they do. They grease the palms. They put their hands in the cookie jar. They eat all the cookies, lick the crumbs, and then they smash the cookie jar. That's what they do here. We cannot agree to terms that are secretive, that no one knows what is going on, and it's by documents must be leaked before us as the public know what's going on in the decisions that government is making. Whenever you enter into a trade agreement, you are not just agreeing to line your pockets. South African politicians, leaders, anyone with a big mouth wants to get up on the stage and give your opinion. You are not just saying yes to lining your pockets. We get that. But you are also saying yes to destroying our country, selling it off bit by bit by bit, without giving us anything in return. There's now also America who are saying, and this is the American government, let me differentiate. The American government, I want to ask you, what is your issue really here with South Africa? Not too long ago, you issued a statement that visitors who come to South Africa must take extra caution because it's not safe. Our crimes are terrible. But as far as I know, we're not the only country where crimes are happening. It's just we take our crime and we hang it on the big bell. for everyone to see. Our criminals are vicious, they are awful, they are horrible. And the crimes that happen here, I don't think you see many of them in other countries. But we're not the only country where crime is happening. But the American government took it upon itself to warn these citizens, right? Then there was an issue. There was, a few months ago, there was a huge LGBTQI, I think I got it right, I'm not sure, parade in Sandton. And then they issued a bomb warning. Really? Really? I mean, seriously. The parade went off without a glitch. No pun intended. Now, recently, the US government, a few days ago, or last week, I don't know when, they said that South Africa has been supplying Russia with weapons. Don't you governments talk to each other? Isn't that something that government to government you were supposed to have discussed? Why is it out in the media? What are you not telling us? Is the South African government not communicating with you? Are they not available? Or do you just feel, let's create instability here? Let's start with just poking the bear and see what comes out. Because that is what governments do. Poke the bear. Poke the bear. Until you find the thing that works. You know what? We love peace and we want peace in our country. We have enough issues to deal with now. We don't like our government very much. We don't. So don't get me wrong. This is not in defense of our South African government, but this is my country. This is where I was born. This is where I live. This is where I raise my children. This is where my life is. Me and about, we are now 60 million people in South Africa. So please, if you as the American government, you have an issue, go and speak to your counterparts. That is why there are structures in place. There are protocols that you have to follow. Follow them. Because once something is out in the media, you cannot take it back. And you are trying to create division in our country. Because here in South Africa, it's pro-Russia, anti-Russia. Pro-China, anti-China. Pro-West, anti-West. We don't need camps. We have enough divisions in this beautiful country. Divisions that stem from our brutal past. Our painful past. And we are still trying to heal. We don't need someone to come in and stir things unnecessarily. We don't want that. And we can see what is happening here. We're not stupid. We are Africans. We have many examples to see where it ends when someone starts spreading reckless messages. Please stop. Please. For the sake of our country and for the sake of peace. Because because of this government that is for sale. Yes, our government is for sale. I needed to say that. This government that is for sale, unfortunately and sadly. There's a level of desperation in South Africa. But there's also a level of hope. And we like to focus on the hope and the possibilities and what can be done. There are amazing people in South Africa. We laugh, we love, we live. And whatever we do it with power and we do it with passion. When we cry hard and loud. When we laugh loud and hard. When we celebrate, you will know that we are happy. That is South Africa. That is the Africa that I love. That is the Africa that I want to see prosper. And as for our leaders, I hope, this is the last of the old cronies. And we need to pay attention of what is not being said. And right now, our South African leaders are not telling us enough. They're not. We need you to talk more. We need you to tell us more about what are the trade agreements in place now. What are the advantages of trading with China? What are the benefits for us as a country? We need to know that. And it's your responsibility to inform us about it. I love this country. I love this continent. I will keep on talking about this love because you cannot live in Africa and not have a love affair with her. She's too powerful. Her draw is too strong. Her soil, it's too invigorating. You have to set foot on this continent to understand what I'm talking about. You have to feel the vibrations of her soul. You have to feel her soil under your feet. And you must feel the heartbeat of this continent. And then you will understand why Africa is special, why she must be protected, and why we must fight for her. Not with guns and with violence, but by rebuilding her, by changing our thinking, by putting our energies and our efforts towards creating opportunities, sharing a positive message, and speaking our minds about our beloved Africa. I thank you. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you for watching, and see you on the other side.